Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the 89th session of the online Optom Learning series. Do let me go ahead and introduce to all of you our speaker for today. Today, we have Dr. Quresh Maskati. He is a very well known ophthalmologist, to be very honest. I have had a fortunate sometime probably meeting him and working him back in India when I was there. And to just give you his background, he did his graduation and post graduation from the KEM Hospital, Bombay University. After that, obtaining his MS, DOMS, FCPS degrees in 1983. And he was also a gold medalist in the DOMS degree. He has a super specialty practice in Mumbai where his focus is on cornea and anterior segment microsurgery as well. And he has specialized this from Boston, USA. He is also a lecturer in ophthalmology, where he started his career in academics in the year 1986, where he did lectures at Nair Hospital and then started his private practice as well. He is also a co-author of various chapters in ophthalmology books. To be more precise, I think 12 books where he has written some chapters. And he has also published a book named Simplifying Eye Care, which is for the general public, which has two editions in 2010 as well as 2013. He has over 24 of scientific publications in his name in national as well as international peer-reviewed journals. He was also president of the Maharashtra Ophthalmological Society and also Bombay Ophthalmologist Association. He has won several awards. The list can go on and I can keep talking for about half an hour for the list of awards what he has been awarded since starting into practice. And he is also the president of the World Society of Small Incision Cataract Surgery, president of the Cornea Society of India. And with all this experience, today Dr. Quresh is going to talk to us about very important and a unique thing which we optometrists have not really seen it into our clinical practice. It is mostly of the ophthalmological aspect. But knowing about keratoprosthesis is really what Dr. Quresh wants us to know, because it can help us in advising our patients and directing them to a proper channel. So welcome, Dr. Quresh, onto our platform. It gives me I'm just eager to listen to your talk. So welcome to our platform, sir.
Thank you, Fakhruddin. And without further ado, let us start. And when Fakhruddin invited me and he sent me the impressive list of people who had spoken before me, 88 of them before me, I was quite humbled. And I thank Fakhruddin and the OOLS for requesting me to address you. It's always a pleasure to address optometrists because I find that you people are the ones who are really eager to learn not only your own craft, but to know more of what the ophthalmologists are doing. And I always feel that the more educated, the more you broaden your outlook and know what the ophthalmologists are doing, the more you'll be able to advise patients, as Fakhruddin correctly said, as to who would benefit from a keratoprosthesis or a KPRO, as we will call it for short, and who will not. So we'll start with the slideshow. And as the title slide says, that it is the last resort for vision restoration. And truly it is the last resort. When all else fails, only then do we think of the KPROs. Now, why is this topic relevant today? Why have I selected it in the middle of this COVID pandemic, which is there? Because due to COVID restrictions and fears all over the world, the eye donation movement has suffered a huge setback. Good quality donor corneas are no longer available, and hence the author, that is myself, corneal surgeon who does penetrating keratoplasty, deep anterior lamellar keratoplasty, the Descemet's membrane endothelial keratoplasty, and things like that. Since the last 9 months, the corneas have dried up, good quality tissue. Since only poor quality tissue, which we had stored for a long time for therapeutic use at minus 80 degrees, or glycerol preserved tissue is available, you can't use it for sight restoration for even a PK, penetrating keratoplasty. But these corneas work very well for the Boston K-Pro, which I will be talking about. And for the Pintucci keratoprosthesis, you don't need a natural cornea. So even during the pandemic, I was able to reduce my waiting list of those waiting for K-Pros. So there are many different K-Pros in the market today. On the top right of the screen, you can see the Daljit Singh the Daljit Singh stainless steel using the Singh Wurst champagne cork keratoprosthesis, which only his family is using now. They've done about 8,000 cases, but the long-term results are not so good. So the other one which is widely used is the osteoodontokeratoprosthesis, which was modified by Falcinelli. It's called the modified osteoodontokeratoprosthesis, or MOOKP, which is very similar to the Pintucci, which I will describe, except that it uses a tooth, human tooth, in which to put the K-Pro, while the Pintucci has a cloth mesh around the PMMA cylinder. We'll see all this as we go along. And the Boston K-Pro, which was invented by Professor Claes Dolman, who's still alive, who's about 92 years of age, and still sees patients at the Boston Mass Eye and Ear Infirmary, where I trained for this. So some questions which will come to your mind as an optometrist: should every opaque cornea that you see be offered at K-Pro? The answer is a resounding no, because corneal transplant gives very good results in a majority of the cases, both the lamellar and the full thickness. If you see the picture on the upper right, that's a penetrating keratoplasty done 25 years ago. Crystal clear cornea, patient has excellent vision and still doesn't have a cataract. In infective keratitis, when there is a corneal abscess and you want to get rid of the abscess, you can't put a K-Pro because all the tissues will melt. So you have to put a large diameter corneal graft, hope to save the eye. And the field of vision in a penetrating graft or even a lamellar graft is like near natural field of vision, while in a K-Pro it is at best about 30 to 40 degrees tubular field in the center. So K-Pro is not offered where you can do a penetrating or a lamellar keratoplasty. So what are the indications therefore for a Boston K-Pro? So Boston K-Pro is offered whenever there is a vascularized or a failed graft. So if there is a cornea which has already undergone a graft and there is 360 degrees vascularization, the cornea is opaque, you can do another corneal graft, but the chances of it being rejected are much higher. With every subsequent graft, rejection chances go much higher. So here you can do a Boston K-Pro instead. Then even if you've never done a graft, but the patient has 360 degrees limbal stem cell deficiency. You know, our limbal stem cells are at the limbus and they provide healthy epithelium to the cornea. And if the limbal stem cells are deficient, like in chemical burns, then the epithelium will have non-healing defects. So you can't do a keratoplasty in such cases. So if there is huge amount of vascularization, the chances of rejection are very high, even if you've never done a corneal graft. So these patients do very well with a Boston K-Pro. Of course, the eyes must have very good visual potential. So the eyes should have no glaucomatous optic atrophy. If you do a B scan, it should not have a retinal detachment. So this is where the optometrist comes in, because you can easily select. A patient walks in to your, he walks into your, say, retail outlet, and he's got one eye good vision, and he wants glasses there, and you look at the other eye and he's got an opaque cornea which is vascularized, and he's possibly been to 3 or 4 eye surgeons who told him nothing can be done in that eye. So if you do a B scan and you find there is no glaucomatous cupping and the retina is well attached, you can tell him that perhaps you can go in for a K-Pro. Boston K-Pro can be done even if the other eye is normal, but a Pintucci K-Pro you can do only in a patient who's bilaterally blind. So for a Boston K-Pro, the tear secretion should be good and the eyelids should be able to open and close well. So therefore, which are the patients who would not benefit from a Boston K-Pro? And those obviously who have very poor tear secretion, as you can see on the left side, a very dry eye with a keratinized cornea. So if the cornea is keratinized, the Boston K-Pro should not be done. And those with a history of previous corneal melts, you can see the young lady in the middle, very hideous looking because her husband threw acid on her, thinking she was unfaithful to him. She was not. And I operated this patient for a Pintucci keratoprosthesis in Pakistan, because you can see the staring appearance. One eye is already lost, and the other eye, the eyelids don't close because they're all adherent over there. So in these patients, you don't need tears for a Pintucci. So here you can do a Pintucci keratoprosthesis. In the man below, you can see that his lid blinks are very poor. The lids are not opposed well. So again, here you can't do a Boston K-Pro. And what are the contraindications for all types of K-Pro? So a patient who is unable to follow up. So for me, that is very important. See, for a cataract, I don't mind if he doesn't follow up because nothing much goes wrong after the first month in a cataract patient. But for a K-Pro, he needs lifetime of care because something can go wrong at any time. Infection can occur at any time. Extrusion of the K-Pro can occur. So he should be able to follow up with a good eye doctor somewhere. Even if that doctor has no experience of K-Pro, I don't mind. I write a long note to them. I tell them, you pick up the phone and talk to me. Send me pictures. Now with these days of WhatsApp and videos, they can send me pictures of my patient and I can advise them what to do. But the patient should be willing to go to a doctor who should be reasonably close to his place of residence. So that is a very important criterion. And if the patient doesn't understand the importance of compliance with the treatment regime, because he has to put drops in his eye lifetime. So if he doesn't understand the importance, he's not intelligent enough. Not that he needs to have a great amount of education, but he has to be intelligent enough to follow instructions and obey them. Again, this is not true for a cataract, but it becomes very critical for a patient with keratoprosthesis or a K-Pro. And of course, the third one is only applicable to me because I'm in solo private practice. So if the patient can't afford my unreasonably high fees, I would generally turn him away. So these are some of the results with the Boston K-Pro. You see on top the chemical burns pre-operatively, blood vessels growing all over. There is 360-degree limbal stem cell loss and a total corneal opacity. And the same patient post-op after I put the Boston K-Pro there. The Boston K-Pro doesn't look too bad cosmetically also. And that's another patient on the upper right, which has got 6x6 vision with a Boston K-Pro. Below on the left, there is a Boston K-Pro with the sutures still there. And in the center, below center, is a young lady who was HIV positive, whom I did a Boston K-Pro. This is the appearance day 1 post-op. So it doesn't look too bad. And on the right side is another patient with a Boston K-Pro with the sutures removed. Typically, we don't remove the sutures unless they become loose or infected. Then we remove the sutures. Otherwise, we don't, because all the Boston K-Pros are covered with a very large diameter scleral contact lens, like a bandage lens. I use a 16 millimeter or an 18 millimeter Contura lens if they get it from abroad, scleral lens, or a 16 millimeter bandage lens, which is available in India. So how do I evaluate the patients? We take the history first, what happened to the patient, how he lost his vision. Then the patient should have a good visual acuity of at least perception of light in all 4 quadrants. Now, sometimes the patient doesn't have that perception because the corneal opacity is so thick or so opaque and so vascularized. So then Dr. Anthony Aldave from California, who taught us this procedure in 2009, he taught me this trick that if persistently you shine the light on the nasal side and the nasal projection of light is always accurate, 15-20 times you try it, the others are not so accurate, but the nasal one is accurate, the chances are that the patient will see well. Then we check the intraocular pressure digitally usually because you don't get good readings with any other device. I check the blink mechanism, the tear secretion, that has to be adequate. Then I want to know whether the patient is phakic or pseudophakic or aphakic, because according to that, I need to order the power of my K-Pro. So I need to know if the patient is aphakic, it's a different power, then I need the axial length of the eye and then order the K-Pro of a particular power. If he is pseudophakic with a good IOL in the posterior compartment, then I don't disturb that pseudophakic, and then I put a plus 45 diopter K-Pro for all pseudophakics. If the patient has a crystalline lens in the eye, then I remove the crystalline lens, make him aphakic, and then put an aphakic K-Pro. The B scan is also important to see, as I told you earlier, whether there is any optic nerve cupping, glaucomatous optic atrophy that can be made out on a B scan, and whether the retina is attached or not. If there's no point in doing this and then finding that your surgery is wonderful, but the retina was detached or there was optic atrophy and the patient cannot see. So we do this, and I normally would take an external photo. If I'm going to present to OOLS, then I must show you some pictures. So this is the picture of what the parts of the Boston K-Pro. It comes, all the parts come separately, sterile and packed, and you need a human cornea as well. So you see on the top, the mushroom-shaped PMMA cylinder. There is a cylinder on which there is like a top hat of PMMA, and the cylinder is important. We call it the stem. So on the stem, so we put this mushroom facing the a small dish, and on face the mushroom we put on the dish with the stem facing the ceiling, and then we take the cornea, donor cornea. We trephine a hole in the center of the donor cornea and place this on that stem, and then we put a back plate which has got 16 holes in it on that stem again after we put the donor cornea, and then there is a titanium locking ring which locks the whole assembly into place. We'll see this, of course, better on a video. So again, to reiterate, this is important, as I said, from the optometry point of view. What are the patients whom you would like to refer for a Boston K-Pro? Person who has had one or more failed corneal grafts, or in whom the patient has poor prognosis for future grafting. If the vision is less than 3/60, so he's really handicapped, and either the patient has poor vision in the other eye, or the patient has good vision but wants good vision in this eye as well, and there is no end-stage glaucoma or retinal detachment, then you would refer the patient. And of course, if you're referring it to me, then the patient should be able to afford my high costs and follow-up charges. So this is the, just to give you an example, the first patients that I did in 2009, I chose a patient with a divergent squint, thinking that the patient would have perhaps amblyopia. The other eye was optic atrophy. So he was a one-eyed patient, but with a divergent squint. And to my surprise, the patient saw 6/12 in spite of the divergent squint within 2 days of doing the procedure. So it's very Hindi movie-like, as I would say, where you remove the bandage and the patient can see. Something like a cataract surgery also. The Boston K-Pro gives you fairly good vision fairly fast. The second patient that I did, as you can see on the right side, was a patient who had a history of corneal melt, and she had an autoimmune condition. So we were told, don't do this. It is actually a contraindication. But at that time, we were younger and more naive and more enthusiastic. And this was the only patient whom I had waiting. So against the better judgment of Dr. Aldave, who taught us this procedure, I went and did this. Then put the patient on immunosuppressives. The patient had 2 or 3 episodes of corneal melt in the last 11 years, but she's still seeing 6/18 now. She's on methotrexate and immunosuppressive medicine. But in hindsight, I don't know. I think I'm happy that I did this, because again, the other eye was optic atrophy. So we'll see the video of this procedure. This is how this is a patient with a failed graft. You can see the sutures are in place, and it's unlikely to improve with a new graft again, because there is limbal stem cell deficiency. So I've put a Fleringa ring, which is a ring you put around in the sclera. But here I wanted to show you how the donor is prepared. So here, this is the patient's donor cornea from a dead person. I've trephined it. Made a hole in the center with a 3.5 millimeter trephine. I put this on the stem of that mushroom-shaped PMMA. I'm putting some PMMA on it. This is the old backplate which had 8 holes. Now the new backplates have 16 holes. I'll show you one video with 16 holes as well. So I put the backplate there, then use a device called a pusher to push it into place. Then I put the titanium ring there, and the titanium ring is also pushed into place with the same pusher. And now the patient is ready for the to be put into the host. And this is another patient in whom I'm doing this procedure. Now this patient had glaucoma as well, so I'm putting what is called an Ahmed glaucoma valve. So this is a stay suture taken in the cornea. The conjunctiva is opened at superior nasal, and this is the Ahmed glaucoma valve which is pushed in. It has got a long tube which goes into the eye. It is cut and pushed in through a 23 gauge needle opening, and the tube is closed with either pericardium or Gore-Tex, or you can use sclera. I've used sclera in this case. Now the cornea is scraped because you don't need the epithelium, and I open the cornea 360 degrees because I want to know the limbus to limbus, because I want to mark the center of the cornea, because it's important to get the K-Pro bang in the center. So here the center of the cornea is noticed. I make a partial thickness trephination with a trephine, disposable trephine. You can use disposable, or you can use fancy trephines as well. I'll show you some of the pictures. This is the marking of the center. This is the center being marked. Now this is the markings for the sutures which will come later on. And now this is again to show you the assembly of the K-Pro. See the PMMA cylinder with the mushroom shaped top. It's put on a sticky tape, so it sticks there into place. Now this is a different type of trephine which I'm going to use to trephine the donor cornea. So the donor cornea's trephination is usually about 9.5 millimeters, because the host cornea is 9 millimeters. So you take the 0.5 millimeters larger. Now I'm making a hole in the center with a dermal trephine, like what people use for skin biopsy. So this is the hole being made in the center. This is done outside, don't need the microscope. Then I put it onto the stem and push it into place with the pusher. And I put some viscoelastic substance, methyl cellulose. This is a pusher, an instrument which pushes the donor cornea flush. This is this 16-hole back plate, which is now put on the stem again. Here I'm putting it on the stem, and I will push it into place with the pusher. Then I put the titanium back plate. So this is again showing you one more repeat action replay, as it were. And this is the titanium ring, which has got a small crack in the center, so that when you put it on, it clicks and holds the PMMA stem very well, so that nothing comes out, the back plate and the host cornea don't come out. And this is the thing assembled well. Now you can put some MK medium there and keep it there while you now work on the patient's eye. So this is, it's kept in fluid. This is the Baron Hesburgh trephine, which is a very fancy trephine. In the earlier picture, I showed you a simpler trephine, a disposable trephine. So you can use various trephines. This is just to show off that I have all these trephines with me at my clinic. So here now I've done a penetrating keratoplasty, a penetrating trephination. So I've removed, this is 9 millimeters I've removed. Now I will cut that tube which was coming into the eye so that it doesn't project so much. I've cut the tube. I found that the pupil was quite stuck and there was synechiae. So I want the pupil well dilated. So I make cuts in the pupil so that the pupil becomes large. Now I put some viscoelastic substance, and now I suture this. The eye was already aphakic. So this is a pseudophakic, an aphakic K-Pro which is put in. And the rest of the steps are exactly like I would do for a keratoplasty. I normally take interrupted 16 sutures. That yellow spot is just to protect the macula in the center while I make my sutures. And then I will put a bandage contact lens, a scleral lens of about 16 millimeters, which we get in our country. Every 2 to 3 months, we change that scleral bandage lens. So the patient sleeps with the lens on, and every 2 to 3 months. So this is the procedure which is completed. You bury the sutures. I typically bury the sutures onto the corneal side. and that's the bandage lens which I will then put on. So the Boston K-Pro is relatively simpler to do than what I'm about to show you, which is the Pintucci keratoprosthesis. Now, Boston K-Pro is done in one stage, as just to repeat, it's done in a single stage in an eye which has got good tear secretion, the lids open and close well, the cornea doesn't have keratinization, and there is no danger of corneal melt. So these are the patients you would do it. And the post-operative treatment is similar to a cataract. For a month or 2 months, you might put the patient on steroid drops. And for a whole lifetime, you will put the patient on antibiotic drops. So though this scleral lens prevents infection, don't rely only on the scleral lens. So every month, I ask them to change. I put the patient on moxifloxacin for 1 month, then gatifloxacin for the second month, then levofloxacin for the third month, then again moxi, gati, and then levo. So every month, he throws away a bottle, and he has to put these drops lifelong. And every 2 to 3 months, I change the scleral lens because deposits otherwise collect on that. You can get infection there. So that's how we look after. And many times the patients can come back to you and you can look after the patient and send the patient back to the ophthalmologist only if you find a problem. So we'll move on from the Boston K-Pro to the Pintucci keratoprosthesis. Now the Pintucci is a whole different ball game. It is done in 2 stages. The 2 stages are 2 months apart. It has to be done under general anesthesia because we take some tissue from the mouth, from the inner lining of the mouth, from the buccal mucosa, we take tissue. And these are typically patients in whom the eyelids are totally stuck to each other, what we call ankyloblepharon or severe symblepharon. So you have to open the eye. You can't put a speculum in. These patients don't have any tear secretion. So you can do a tarsorrhaphy on both sides. I will show you that. But it is done in 2 stages. In the first stage, let's go over the slides and we'll see. So I've done 85 cases in Asian eyes, including in Malaysia. So this is the patient post-op Pintucci 10 years later. Unfortunately, unlike the Boston K-Pro, the cosmetic appearance is not so good. So you can see in this patient, the right eye has the Pintucci keratoprosthesis, which is poking out from buccal mucosa, which is covering her conjunctiva. So it looks a little bulky and it looks odd. The other eye has got an optic atrophy. So it's one-eyed patient. We only do it in one-eyed patients. So this patient is very unhappy and depressed because she says the cosmetic appearance is not good. When she goes to play cards with her friends, she's 6'9". When she goes to play cards with her friends, she says that keep staring at my eye. I told her, madam, you have perception of light vision in this eye and you could never have played cards with your friends. So why don't you take it as a blessing? But she doesn't. So she complained to Dr. Pintucci, who taught me this technique also. And Pintucci died before he could find a solution. So the moral of the story is that people who attempt such heroic surgery like the Pintucci die quite prematurely. Pintucci died at the age of 55. I am 64 and I'm counting my days. So I did 85 bilaterally blind Asian patients. They have to be bilaterally blind because you can't do it. If one eye is good, there's no point in doing this surgery because it takes so long. It takes about 3 hours each stage to do. And the results are not guaranteed at all. Unlike the Boston K-Pro, where almost 90-95% of them will see 6/6. Here, only about 60% of them will have working vision by which they can go to the toilet. So 85 bilaterally blind patients with accurate light perception in at least one eye, and all were unsuitable for any penetrating keratoplasty whatsoever. And the B scan showed an attached retina. So these were the criteria that we used. Now this is what the Pintucci K-Pro looks like. On the top, you can see this, the PMMA cylinder. For those who are familiar with South Indian cuisine, there is a Dacron mesh. You can see that like a cloth on the, it's not in the center of the PMMA cylinder. The PMMA cylinder has a power, and this Dacron mesh is a 0.6 millimeter cloth, something like the sari that all women wear in Malaysia, Nepal, or India, in many places in South Asia. So it's like, it's made of Dacron mesh. Dacron is also used for making saris. It's 0.6 millimeters in thickness. I compare it to the Indian dish called the Medu Vada. So if you can imagine the Medu Vada sitting over a PMMA cylinder, eccentrically sitting, That's what the Pintuchi keratoprosthesis is about. For those who are not familiar with Medu Vadas, I would say, the ballet dancers, their can skirts, which are very stiff skirts worn around the waist, which balloon out like that. So something like a can of a ballet dancer, if you can imagine, that's the shape of the Pintuchi K-Pro. So the optical cylinder is medical grade PMMA, and the haptic, if you could call it that, is Dacron mesh, like a sari, which has got like cloth fibers, 0.6 millimeters in thickness. On the lower part of the screen is the late Professor Stefano Pintucci, who taught me this procedure. This is a patient whom I operated in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, in the Tun Hussein Hospital. This patient was a milk vendor who on whom somebody had thrown acid by mistake. By mistake meaning he mistook him for somebody else on whom he had enmity. This poor milk vendor had 18 previous surgeries before I saw him in 2006, and I offered to do the Pintuchi K-Pro. So for that I had to fly down to KL twice to the Tun Hussein, and I operated him, and he could see well through this. So I got written about in the local newspaper there. And 5 years after that, I got a call from the Tun Hussein Hospital saying that your patient is no more. He has died. And I said, I'm so sorry. And then they told me, he would not have died if you had not operated on him. So I was given a curse for having killed him. I said, what did I do? He says, well, because the patient got back 6/9 vision, he resumed vending milk. So he used to go early, 5 o'clock in the morning, with his milk dabba, milk containers, and he was crossing the road at 5 in the morning. And these Pintuchi patients have tubular vision of about 30 degrees. So he didn't see a truck coming from his left side, and the truck didn't see him because it was dark. So the truck knocked him over and he died on the spot. And they told me if he had been blind, he would not have been able to work, and so he would have lived to a ripe old age. So one of the hazards, occupational hazards of doing a Pintuchi K-Pro is, one is your patients are miserable, they are depressed, and they curse you. Then the surgeon who invented this died and premature death. And when my patients die, the doctors curse me for having given them sight. So it's not a very rewarding surgery. Certainly cataract surgery is much more rewarding financially as well. So the lighter side aside, we did bilaterally blind patients with at least light perception in the eye, B scan showing attached retina and no glaucomatous optic cupping. As I told you earlier, tear secretion is not mandatory in these procedures. So this is the buccal mucosa which is being removed. The lower lip is held in something like a Calazion clamp. If you've seen a Calazion clamp, it's held in something like that. It's a bloody surgery, so it's done under general anesthesia. We require the buccal mucosa because there is no conjunctiva left. The lids are all stuck to each other. The conjunctiva is all friable. So I need some tissue to support the Pintuchi K-Pro. So we take this buccal mucosa. The bleeding is stopped with hydrogen peroxide. We can take sutures after removing this thick piece as well. This is the buccal mucosa along with the muscle underneath, which is the orbicularis oris muscle. Same muscle which is used for kissing people, but then I take it out as a fairly thick graft and I thin it out a little. See, now these are the type of patients we do a Pintuchi. So the eyelids are stuck. I cannot put even a speculum inside. So I have to first hold the lids with two strong stitches and try and pull them apart. Then I put a scissor inside and cut open the connective tissue, the fibrous tissue, and then try and find I'm cutting it open here. Then I try and find the cornea. I know the black portion is the cornea, so around it, I open the conjunctiva. I try and find the 4 rectus muscles, superior, inferior, medial, and lateral rectus, because I know that there is blood supply along that. So I know that if I suture this buccal mucosa, so this is the buccal mucosa now, which I took out from the mouth. I suture it to the 4 recti muscles because I know that it will get blood supply. See, it's a free graft, free mucosal graft. It needs blood supply, otherwise it will melt. So I put it there and I suture with Vicryl sutures to the 4 recti, and then to whatever conjunctival tissue I find around, I suture it there to the conjunctiva so that it stays in place. The poor patient, if he could see little bit of light, now you will see less light because the cornea is covered with a thick buccal mucosa. I keep this buccal mucosa in place for 2 months. Then it thins out a little inside the eye. So once I've put this, I suture the buccal mucosa all around. Then I open the lower eyelid and I put the Pintuchi. I take the Pintuchi K-Pro from its sterile packaging and put it under the lower eyelid. Why do I do that? So now this part is over. I've managed to open the eye fully. Here I'm opening the skin and the orbicularis oculi muscle, and I'm putting the Pintuchi K-Pro upside down under the muscle. So this is 2 cat's paw retractors. This is the Pintuchi K-Pro being put under the muscle, as you can see. And then the muscle is sutured into place and the skin is sutured. So for 2 months, we leave it under the lower lid. What happens is that blood vessels and fibrous tissue grows into the Dacron mesh, that cloth material, and makes it like that of the patient. It becomes what we call bio-integrated. So it will not get rejected. 2 months later, I open the bump, which I can feel under the lower lid, and I remove the Pintuchi K-Pro. Now you see how the Pintuchi, the Dacron mesh, which was so thin, just 0.6 millimeters, has become so thick now because fibrous tissue and blood vessels have grown into it. So I clean it, I take it out of the eye, I clean it well. Outside, I remove excess tissue. So now this is how it looks cleaned with the PMMA cylinder, and now the Dacron mesh is thick. Now I open the eye, I take superior rectus suture, and then I reflect the buccal mucosal flap. I'm making 2 incisions on either side. I'm going to do a tarsorrhaphy. In these patients who have bone dry eyes, you do a tarsorrhaphy so that the patient is only going to see through the PMMA cylinder. So you don't need the whole eye open. Otherwise, unnecessarily, there's more dryness. So now I'm made preparations for tarsorrhaphy. Now I'm reflecting the buccal mucosa. Something like how you reflect a LASIK flap. If you've seen LASIK surgery, refractive surgery, how they reflect the flap on a hinge. Here also I've reflected the flap on a hinge. This is a 4 millimeter trephine, which is like the skin biopsy trephine, 4 millimeter. Partial thickness cut is made in the cornea. And then I make 12 o'clock, 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock cuts in the cornea. I'm going to remove the iris and the lens of the eye. So this is a bloody surgery and a radical surgery. In a Boston K-Pro, you don't remove all this. So here the iris is being pulled out. So you don't want anything inside except the vitreous jelly and the retina. Because if you keep iris, the patient can get iritis, iridocyclitis. So here this is intracapsular cataract extraction with a cryo. If there is a lens, you remove the lens with a crystalline or a pseudophakic. Then I suture the 3 incisions in the cornea. Then I put this PMMA cylinder inside with the Dacron mesh outside, suture the Dacron mesh to the cornea, suture the buccal mucosa into place, and then make a hole in the buccal mucosa so that the PMMA, so that the patient can see through that hole and the patient can get 6/9 vision. So the visual results, you see how it is with the PMMA cylinder poking out through the buccal mucosa. The upper one is 5 years post-op. The lower one is 10 years post-operatively. So patients had no improvement in vision in 12 patients out of the 85, 3 feet to 20/60 in about 64 patients. So they could go to the toilet by themselves and eat their own food. They were not dependent on anybody. And 20/60 to 20/20 in only 9 patients, roughly about 10% of the patients only had good vision where they could read or they could watch TV. But it's all right. They were just, otherwise they were totally blind. And every patient has had a complication. Some of them had more than one complication. So retroprosthetic membrane, extrusion of the K-Pro because the buccal mucosa melted. You can see the top left picture that all the Dacron mesh is exposed because the buccal mucosa has melted. On the upper, you see that optic atrophy, patient got glaucomatous optic atrophy. The small picture there is of phthisis, and the lower picture is the one where the buccal mucosa is so thick that it grew over the K-Pro, and had to keep chopping off the buccal mucosa because patient went from 6/9 vision to PL. Then you would chop off buccal mucosa, which was overgrowing over the K-Pro. So it would go back to 6/9 and so forth. So glaucoma, phthisis, panophthalmitis, endophthalmitis, all these sort of things, retinal detachments, 10 out of the patients had detachment. So many patients had multiple procedures to be done. So secondary procedures were done, retinal detachment surgery. You see this B scan. I am the only person in the world who's had dropped K-Pro. So you see that spike on the A scan and the white thing in the vitreous, that's the dropped K-Pro. You've seen dropped IOL, but this is a dropped K-Pro in the vitreous, and patient had a retinal detachment because of this, and then the K-Pro was removed by the retinal surgeon, and I put a second K-Pro into that eye. So we've done that in 3 occasions. We've done YAG capsulotomies, excision of pre-prosthetic membranes, vitrectomies. So we've done a lot of secondary procedures as well. So that's what I said. It's important that the patient understands that it's not a one-time procedure. He will have to come again and again. Most of the patients, of course, have paid me so much for the first procedure that they no longer pay me for the complications. So all the other surgeries I have to do free of charge. So in conclusion, though we see many more bad cases of bad chemical trauma as compared to cases of ocular surface disease and pemphigus in Dr. Pintucci series. He had done about 1,500 cases before he died. The Pintucci K-Pro works quite satisfactorily in Asian eyes. Almost 65% of the patients showed some improvement in visual acuity. So to summarize my talk, though good quality donor corneas are not available just now because of COVID, I made use of poor grade corneal tissue to do quite a few Boston K-Pros in the last few months. And I also did a few Pintucci K-Pros, which requires 2 stages and does not require human corneal tissue in this COVID period. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'll be most happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Quresh, for taking us through this whole. I think it's kind of a movie for me as well. Knowing about.
Yeah, it's just something fascinating to see and to know that something like this is possible for your patients.
That's right. Yeah. So at least we as primary, frontliners, if I may put it that way,
Yes.
we know now which patients could probably be, benefited by these keratoprosthetics procedure, and we can direct them to a corneal surgeon which does that. If they are based in India, definitely to you.
Yes. Yes.
You can have that done for them, and they can see more better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so one question which runs through my mind is, of course, the pre-evaluation you did mention that you must make sure that the tear secretions are good
For the Boston K-Pro.
For the Boston K-Pro and all that. How would you think that we can play a role for post-operative management, if you would want to highlight that part?
Yes, you see what happens is that it is almost impossible. Most of my patients come from long distances and they don't have eye surgeons in the area, but they all have optometrists as primary care physicians. So what you can do, see, let's divide this question into what you can do with the Boston K-Pro and the Pintucci. So I'll talk about the Boston K-Pro first. All of them have scleral lenses in their eye, and all of them need this scleral lens to be changed every 2 to 3 months. Now they come all the way long distance to me just to change the scleral lens, which the optom can just keep, because if you talk to me or you talk to the operating surgeon, he'll just tell you which scleral lens you need to keep in stock with you. So you can keep that in stock and simply change. So what you do is, when you remove a scleral lens, normally I give them, I wash the eye with either saline, or I wash the eye with diluted betadine solution, povidone iodine solution. And then I place the fresh lens. So this is something which every 2 months or 3 months, I used to call them every 2 months. In Boston, they call them every 2 months. But because of the finances, the logistics of coming far away, I've changed it to 3 months. So you can call them every 2 months to your clinic and simply change the contact lens. If all is well, he doesn't need to see me. And then from there, you can just send a picture of the eye that all is well. So every 2 months, optometrist, I think, has a tremendous role in looking after the Boston K-Pro patients. And I would love it if they would just go to them for the change. They can see me once a year then for checkup. As far as the Pintucci K-Pro is concerned, many things can go wrong. What you have to see is whether there is the earliest problem which occurs is a melt in the buccal mucosa. So if you see a little white shining through, that's the Dacron mesh which is shining through from the pink buccal mucosa. It should be, the whole eye should be pink with the buccal mucosa and just the black of the PMMA cylinder which is there. If you see any white area there, then that is the first sign of trouble. and you can tell the patient to see his operating surgeon. But till such time, you can just advise him to keep seeing you every 2 to 3 months. These patients need to be put on lubricant drops. So again, these are over-the-counter lubricants. They don't need antibiotics. So post Pintuchi, we don't put them on antibiotics for life because nothing is exposed. The PMMA is under buccal mucosa. Buccal mucosa is exposed to the air, but it cannot get infected. So in normal circumstances, unless there is a gape or a melt of the buccal mucosa, then you need antibiotics. Until then, only just lubricating drops you make sure, because if they don't put lubricating drops, then that buccal mucosa gets keratinized and then it becomes more prone to melt. So you need to make sure that they're putting lubricating drops. Usually I will do a tarsorrhaphy on the sides, but in case tarsorrhaphy is not done and there is some tears, then I don't do tarsorrhaphy. So then lubricating drops, and look out for buccal mucosal melt. And the first sign that the patient tells you that my vision is dropping, he could be having early endophthalmitis inside. So he needs to see an eye surgeon. So if there is a drop in vision in either of the Kpros, or in the Pintuchi Kpro, if you see any white shining through the buccal mucosa, you need to refer the patient. In the Boston Kpro, you need to change the lens every 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, that's a very good takeaway. I think these things we can do it, and we can definitely be in touch with the operating surgeon, and we can work it out together, and probably reduce your burden in terms of so many patients, and you can spend more time doing the surgeries than to see the follow-ups, right?
Right, yeah.
And one question is again, how do you go about counseling your patients for Kpro? Any tips or any magic words you talk to them about?
Yeah, actually, it's a very good question, Zulfikar. The issue is that I try to talk them out of it more than talking them into it, because I've been doing this, and perhaps I'm one of the only person in the world doing the Pintuchi and the Boston. So I cover all types of patients. I get patients from all over pleading with me to do some things, and it becomes very disheartening for me to say no, because for example, I get a patient I do a B scan and he's 16 millimeters axial length. Now 16 millimeters patient is going into phthisis. So I don't do any patient who has got 16 millimeter or less of the axial length, whether it is a Pintuchi or a Boston Kpro. So they come with with the great hope that I will restore sight. And the B scan is the one which I rely very heavily on a B scan. So the B scan tells me three things. One is if the patient is pre-phthysical or already going into phthisis. Sometimes I see 12 and 14 millimeters and a soft eye. I know this patient is going to go phthysical. And I learned it the hard way, because in my Pintuchis, because they were so difficult, the surgeries, I would operate on every blind person that I saw. And my first 5 patients all went into phthisis. And then when I examined them, I realized that they were going into phthisis in any case. I should not have done the Kpro for them. So then I became very, very choosy. The problem is it's very difficult to turn away a blind person when, they've heard so much about you and they say, you can 100% you will do something. So I tell them, if there is a retinal detachment, if there is optic cupping on B scan, I simply refuse. And if the perception of light is not very good, even nasally is not always perfect, then I will refuse these patients. So it's important, A, to refuse, to know which patients to refuse, and this you can do at your level itself. And secondly is that when you counsel, you tell them that many things can go wrong. It is not like a cataract surgery. Even after successful Kpro surgery, you might lose vision 6 months down the line, or even 10 years down the line, you may go blind again. And there is every likelihood that your doctor might require to do more procedures for you after the surgery. So they have to keep the expenses in mind, that it's not a one-time. For example, this scleral contact lens costs about roughly about $10 in India. So that $10 is a recurring expense every 2 months for them. And $10 can be a lot for a patient in a rural area. So they need to know this, that for a Boston Kpro, there is a recurring cost of antibiotic drop for life and a scleral lens every 2 to 3 months. For the Pintuchi, there is a recurring cost that almost all of them have required a second or a third or a fourth surgery to keep their eye going. So there is a lot of expense involved in this, and they need to be sure that they're able to do this. Otherwise, they just throw up their hands and say, "Doctor, now I spent all my money," which has happened with me on the first surgery. Now I don't have any money. I've had to actually pay money to them to get it done, because they said, "We are not coming from 3,000 kilometers away for the surgery unless you give us the return fare home." So in couple of patients, it has happened that I will pay for your fare because I feel responsible that I've given you 6/9. Now you're PL. I want to help you. Come, I will pay you your return fare. You go to go back. But that shouldn't be a routine. Yeah.
That's right. So I think more of counseling part, we must also make sure that they understand the ongoing challenges and ongoing recurring costs and a lot of
True.
other things as well, right?
True.
Yeah.
Absolutely true.
Yeah. And one more question. Let's say if there is, because you did mention that B scan plays a very important part.
Yeah.
Would there be a difference in seeing a K-Pro and a dislocated IOL in terms of
No, I'll tell you, because the K-Pro can only dislocate in a Pintucci, and in the Pintucci there is no IOL. I've removed the lens, I've removed the iris, I've removed the central vitreous, so there is no IOL. So whatever drops inside is only the K-Pro. So you don't have to, both cannot drop. There is no IOL in a Pintucci K-Pro, so only the K-Pro can drop. But it looks very similar because it's a PMMA cylinder. So it looks fairly cylinder. There is a spike on the A scan, and there is a white mass in the center. So it looks like a dislocated IOL. Only thing we know that there is no IOL, so it has to be a K-Pro.
That's right. Yeah. So this again clarifies our understanding about Pintucci, and it almost looks the same because it's a PMMA. Again, that's very important for us to know. And I think a good take-home message is working together with fellow eye care professionals like ophthalmologists who do these corneal surgeries and co-managing it. I think you definitely made it very clear that we can definitely co-manage it together and reduce the burden of
absolutely
of your segment. So thank you so much, Dr. Quresh, for
thank you.
Highlighting that point, which is really important because we do see a lot of patients, and some of us who are into corneal practices where we fit scleral lenses, we see more of keratoconus patients and all that. We should always keep this option in mind. We always think about keratoplasty is the ultimate, right? For us as optometrists, we always think that anything happen in terms of surgery management for keratoconus, there are only three things what I know. One is keratoplasty, which is the ultimate. Then you have corneal cross-linking, and then you have intacts. So these are the three things only I think most of us would probably know. Yes. And maybe we have heard about K-Pro, but not so much in detail, and knowing about the whereabouts of how these things are done. So thank you so much, Dr. Quresh, for doing this for us.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to take this opportunity from the attendees as well as from the team Online Optom Learning Series. Again, thanking you for giving us your time on a Saturday evening. It's a festive holiday time, I would say. It's a Christmas time, and we are going into a brand new year. Hopefully that year turns out to be good for every one of us.
Absolutely.
So thank you for giving us that time.
Thank you, Fakhruddin. Thank you so much. Okay, bye now.
Bye. Thank you, sir.
Bye.
We do have a session tomorrow, which is again mostly related to cornea, but this is going to be more of the lessons which we learned from keratoconus when distorted optics meets binocular vision. So it's more towards an optometric perspective of understanding optics as well as binocular vision aspects in keratoconus. It is at the same time as of today, 6:30 evening Indian time and 9 p.m. late evening Malaysian time. For those who have not registered to the Online Optom Learning Series yet, we would advise if you could go to our website, which is www.skoptics.org. You can look out for the segment known as OOLS and register your interest. We will then add you to our Google groups and our WhatsApp group where we keep sharing some details and information about our future sessions. And you are definitely invited to join all our future sessions. So thank you everyone for attending today. I hope to see you all tomorrow. Take care, be safe, and bye bye for now.